Te Whariki, as I said, is a curriculum, the early childhood education curriculum. It is mandatory in all state-funded early child care centres. And to be honest with you, and I've had my children in early child care centres within living memory, obviously, um, that the version that my children went through, and I'm just trying to think, if Theo's now 16, and he was there until he was 5, so it was 11 years ago, roughly. So the version of in Te Whariki was around then. It's been around, I think, 95, 96 from memory, was when it was first put out as a curriculum. And the reason why it was a curriculum was because the policymakers and politicians at the time, including myself, said, well, wait on, if you are going to have early childhood education in this country, you may as well concentrate on the education part. So let's work out what we want to teach 2, 3 and 4-year-olds, or 3 and 4-year-olds at the time. I think you can now, 3 and 4-year-olds. Let's find out what you want to teach them before they get into the compulsory education system, and they go into, year 0 or year 1 at primary school. In some ways, it's a fraught issue, because what do you teach a 3 or a 4-year-old? If you went to Te Whariki, you're probably no better off from knowing. So I think it's about a 65-page document. And it doesn't say by the time that a kid comes out of early childhood education, they should know something like how to write their name, or the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, or how to wash their hands. Simple, basic stuff. How to get dressed. Regulate some of their self-regulate some of their behaviour, those sorts of things. If I asked you a question as to what do you think you would expect a kindergarten to teach your 3 or 4-year-old child, I can't imagine that you'd expect them to actually be able to know the alphabet necessarily, to be able to read and write or be numerate. I would think that you would think that that's the responsibility of the school. And that's what the primers are for, or those years 1 and 2 in particular, at setting up those bases. In fact, I have to be very honest with you, I always regarded early childhood says myself, with my 3 children, or the 3 youngest anyhow, as very little more than child-minding institutions. I wanted them to look after my children, play with the other kids, socialise with them, go down to sleep, have some nice stories told to them, maybe do a bit of play by banging stuff together, or even doing a little bit of maybe baking, putting things together, running around outside, playing on the jungle gyms, or what they called the adventure playgrounds, maybe getting the occasional visit to some sort of swimming or aquatic place, going for a walk into, I don't know, your lake at the reserve and looking at the insects and the birds and stuff like that, learning their names. Pretty simple stuff, to be honest with you. I'm not asking them to educate my child or necessarily, that's my job as a parent. If I want to teach them ABCD, give them some basic maths, read their books to them, I'll do that. But if you're going to carry on doing as well, brilliant, fantastic. So it's really, what do you want a 65-page curriculum for? Well, if you go and read Te Whariki now, it still won't tell you what you should teach the kids. It's essentially an ideological document, and essentially sets out a vision and a strategy, all those stupid words, without actually planning or giving you an idea as to what it's going to actually look like. The worst part of the 2017 version is, as Judy Gill has just pointed out, that it is steeped in a Māori, Te Ao Māori worldview. Now, I don't mind Te Ao Māori or Mataranga Māori being discussed, probably at social studies, or in Māori studies, if you're going to study Māori or Te Reo at school. This elevates it, and Judy Gill's absolutely right, to the central structure of the new curriculum of Te Whariki. And can I give you an example of this? At the end of the particular assessment in a whole series of words that are largely ideological, it comes to the assessment regime. So how do you assess what a kid's learning, and then how do you communicate, work out how to make that assessment, and then how do you communicate to that parents. Now, when I had Theo, he had a little book, and every week I'd get an update of that book, and I'd have a nice photo of him and a series of relatively simple things that he might have learned over that particular time, some of the issues that he might have been having over that particular week, and they'd give it to me, and I'd take it home over the weekend, and I'd give it back to them on a Monday. Really good. It was excellent. I've kept them. And I imagine most of you who've got children and grandchildren have done the same. They're sitting there waiting for your children to become adults and then look back one day. And as I've done with mine, I've kept them for Lucy, Zoe and Theo. Right. Brilliant little pieces of social history, I have to say. Well, the assessment regime now is slightly different. And the assessment regime, and I'm just going to read you a paragraph, right? And it's just a paragraph, and if this doesn't set your teeth on edge, nothing will. Remember, this is for all children, so it's not just for Māori children, but this is for European children, for Indian children, for Pacific Island children from Sri Lanka, from the Philippines, from South Africa, from China, India, wherever. This is for the assessment regime of all children in the state-funded early child care kindergarten system of our country. And here we go. A kaupapa Māori approach to assessment. Now you're not taking an assessment that's New Zealand or European, or it's been before, or it's Western. It's a kaupapa Māori approach to assessment predominates. So that's how you assess a kid's progress. And it situates, I'll carry on reading, the child within Māori ways of knowing and is carried out in ways that recognise and support the educational aspirations that whānau have for mokopuna. Now, this isn't just Māori kids, by the way, that are in the system. This is for all children within the system. You have to situate your child for assessment within the Māori way. Now, not the European way, not the Western way, not the mainstream way. No, within the Māori way of knowing and being. Kaupapa Māori assessment requires kaiako. Now, we'll just interchange the word teacher, and we'll put a Māori word there instead, and we won't even put kaiako/teacher or teacher/kaiako. We'll just put the Māori word there. Kaupapa Māori assessment requires kaiako to recognise what and who mokopuna, again, bring to the early childhood context, including their inherent strengths, traditions, history, whānau, and whakapapa. Assessment informed by kaupapa Māori does not view the child in isolation, but recognises that the mokopuna emerges from rich traditions and is linked strongly with whānau, hapu, and iwi. Now, I'm sorry, my child doesn't have a whānau, hapu, and iwi. He has a family, an extended family. Doesn't have a hapu, doesn't have an iwi, doesn't have a rich tradition, whatever that might mean, and isn't informed by, his assessment's not going to be formed necessarily by whakapapa. So I don't give a rat's ass, to be perfectly honest with you, what Theo's grandparents did, or their great-grandparents, or generations 8 prior to that. I only care about what Theo's doing now, what he can do, and what potentially he can be taught for his future life. I've got no intention of letting him be held back by his father, his mother, his grandparents, or his great-grandparents, or generations prior. It's irrelevant what they did, who they are, what gods they worshipped, or anything like that. This is my son today, and he needs to learn the skills and the academic abilities that give him a future. If you're going to actually have a whole series of spiritual ancestors looking over his shoulders, A, it would scare the crap out of him, and B, it's irrelevant. But that is the assessment regime that Te Whāriki insists that its early childhood educators, paid for by the state, incorporate for every child in our kindergartens today. Is that not absurd, eh? B, is that not monocultural in a bad way? And C, isn't it declamatory? In other words, isn't it denying that children that don't come from a Māori background have any particular culture or tradition that is worthy of being a part of the assessment regime? Your thoughts?